Welcome to this week's edition of the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. Lots to talk about today. And the leading item, I would say, is the tendency of the Snowden snow job to collapse before the eyes of the world in an atmosphere of increasing skepticism. And believe me, it is high time that one of these CIA limited hangout Psyops collapsed, that it were defeated. And that seems to be what we may have within reach, that this character will face his future amidst a climate of general indifference. Indeed, he would be very well advised to take the generous offer from Russian President Putin to live peacefully in Moscow and to stop his limited hangout psychological warfare operation. Stop trying to make trouble between the United States and Russia. Stop trying to make trouble between the United States and China. And above all, stop trying to push Obama into the Syrian war, because that, as we have been pointing out, is indeed the issue. In the course of the last week, we had Putin saying that this whole Snowden affair is like trying to shear a pig. Lots of squealing, but little result. There's no wool, right? You don't get any benefit at the end of the day. And I take that sardonic comment from the Russian president as indicating, of course, that as a trained professional, he sees it, well, frankly, more or less the way I see it. The way any trained professional would, as distinct from a hysterical left liberal hungry for a hero after decades of defeat, or a libertarian piling onto Snowden because little Rand Paul opportunistically decided that this was the way to get some gate receipts in the short term. No, sorry, it is a CIA limited hangout operation. We've got the skepticism registered by Putin. We've also got skepticism registered just a couple of hours ago, at least I believe, in a Russia Today RT Spanish language interview, of course, with the Venezuelan president, Maduro, who was visiting Moscow and who advanced the idea in this very interesting interview that Snowden is manipulated. Well, that is a very elegant way, I guess, to put it. He certainly is manipulated. This is part of his job. In the course of the last week, we have got corroborating evidence that this character is dirty, right? We have the Washington Post publishing some postings that Snowden had put on Ars Technica website, where he says that he believes that all leakers should be shot, and they should be shot with genital mutilation, let's say. They should be shot, with genital mutilation. Leave it at that. And he also, he rails against WikiLeaks, interestingly enough, his newfound friends. So this kind of stuff indicates the Damascus Road, and I'll try to tell you the significance of that when we come back in a minute on the Webster Tarpley program. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. Today is July 2nd, 2013. It's the second day at Gettysburg. Today is the day when the Fifth Corps of George Sykes was instrumental in pushing the Confederates first back across the Wheatfield Road, across Plum Run, the Valley of Death, within sight of Little Round Top, and then holding on to a position between Houck's Ridge and the Wheatfield into very late in the afternoon, and then they were forced to give up that position. They were driven back, had to retreat across the Valley of Death. But these people from the Fifth Corps had been earlier instrumental in deterring Confederate General Ewell from launching his planned attack on Culp's Hill in the night between the 1st and the 2nd of July. Just the presence of Sykes beyond and perhaps behind the Confederate left wing was enough to deter Ewell from pursuing that attack. So there's a sense in which the Fifth Corps, with its characteristic Maltese cross, was decisive. And I'm remembering my own ancestor, Joseph Henry Tarpley, who, as far as I've been able to determine, was a part of that unit. The Fifth Corps of George Sykes, the 2nd Division of Romaine Ayres, the 2nd Brigade of Burbank, and the 11th United States Regulars, not a state regiment, but a U.S. regular regiment formed, in this case in Boston, of raw recruits, certainly not professional soldiers, Boston between July and October of 1861. So there's a glorious page. We'll try to talk about the Gettysburg 150th anniversary commemoration. There are lights and shadows. There are good points, and then there are other things that have been neglected. But Snowden, the business at hand. The main goal of agitation at the moment must be to stop the attack on Syria, a vast general war in the Middle East, leading to God knows what. There are viable scenarios that have this leading to superpower confrontation, and then God knows what after that. And I'm not in the business of loading on hysterical adjectives or preaching that the sky is falling, but that is an unlimited catastrophe that might well ensue. So the mobilization has to be hands off Syria, keep out of Syria, stop the war in Syria. But somehow, some people who didn't seem to care too much about 9/11 in the sense of getting the truth, they didn't really care if Afghanis were going to be killed, didn't care if Iraqis were being killed, they didn't care much if Libya was being bombed and 30 or 50,000 people killed, didn't care much if the U.S. and the British and the Israelis started a huge destabilization over in Syria, right, overthrew all the other governments in the Arab world. No, didn't care about that, but they care about their privacy. All right, fine. I guess it's, if you mobilize for anything, it's this. But the problem is that when we look at this cast of characters, the London Guardian slandered me not so many years ago on the issue of 9/11 truth. Also covered me, right? There are different factions. I mean, Charlie Skelton is there. Charlie Skelton's a fine fellow, but I'm afraid he's the minority, right? And the people who make that paper from day to day, more or less express the views of the left wing of British intelligence, right there. They reflect the outlook of the left wing of MI6, and that is a bad deal. So, they, along with Glenn Greenwald, what do we know about Glenn Greenwald? Glenn Greenwald supported the Iraq war during the entire relevant time. He might have turned against it when Obama came on the scene, but during the hot years of 04, 05, 06, perhaps into 07, Glenn Greenwald, not a peep against the Iraq war. And not a peep against Bush and Cheney. He basically abdicated to the superior judgment of Bush and Cheney. And his hostility to 9/11 truth was always there and expressed primarily in his embrace of the blowback thesis, and then that was it. Glenn Greenwald, who wrote these two articles that projected Snowden into the firmament of fame back on the 5th and 6th of June, about a month ago now, Glenn Greenwald is also reported to be an investor in a a pornographic enterprise in Brazil, about which the details are apparently on the internet. So that's according to published reports. And then we look at Snowden. somebody who wanted to join the special forces as a killer in 2004 and go to Iraq and kill people to make them free. And then in 2009 voiced his feeling that the whistleblowers should be executed. They should be shot with genital mutilation in the process. So what can we make of this? Well, remember, let's repeat it again. The conceptual approach is that there are 5 giveaways. There may be more, but these 5 generally suffice to do the job. The leaker, be it Ellsberg, Assange, or Snowden, becomes an immediate media darling. Now, as we're seeing now, the affection can then cool. But at the beginning, the launch phase of this thing is the media darling, right? The papers all lined up to print the Pentagon Papers. Assange had this media cartel of 5 or 6 of the top international newspapers, Le Monde and Der Spiegel and the New York Times and the Guardian, El País, I guess, on and on. He had all that. And then with Snowden, it was essentially the entire world media. So, an immediate media darling. The second point is, they don't tell you anything new. I'm sorry, he still has not told us anything new. If you were following Echelon back under Clinton, not even under Bush, but Echelon, the Anglo-Saxon conspiracy, right? The U.S., the British, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and how that was spying on Europe, well, then you know all this stuff about the U.S. spying on Germany and so forth. So there's nothing new. There's nothing new in the Pentagon Papers that wasn't in the French press. And there's nothing new with Assange that was not already known. He added some pictures, that's true. The emotional shock of seeing the film of the atrocity is greater than reading an account, that's for sure. But other than that, nothing is added in terms of the factual picture. So with Assange, you got a whole series of things that you already knew. And you don't need to bow down and grovel for Assange because you knew all that stuff. You knew about Echelon. You knew about Trailblazer. You knew about warrantless wiretaps, the National Security Agency and the CIA. You knew, or you should have known. If you didn't know, I'm afraid you have to examine your conscience or your intelligence quotient or something similar. So that's number 2. Number 3 is we don't learn anything from these people about the really big covert operations of the age. We don't learn anything about the Kennedy assassination or about 9/11 or about the Gulf of Tonkin incident or about the Arab Spring or about the attack on Libya or the attack on Syria or other plans. No. And the only people who get hurt in this are people that are on the CIA hit list, right? No Israeli, U.S., or British politician has been damaged in the least by this. Remember, at the end of 2011, it was Hillary Clinton's media advisor who told France 24 that no problems had been generated for the State Department by Assange because all his leak showed was the State Department doing good around the world, right? It was an advertisement for the State Department. And that is what Paolo Sarpi wrote about in 1620, the essay, it's a report to the Venetian Senate, Confutar Scritture Maledice, how you confute, how you refute slanderous writings. And you do it by saying something good while pretending to say something bad. If I say today, the CIA and the NSA are tapping your phone, I'm saying something good about them compared to what they're really doing. That they're massacring people in Syria and they're getting ready to massacre them on a larger scale. It's the old, Hitler was mean to his dog. If that's all you can say about Hitler, you really haven't said anything. You've really done him a favor, right? If that's all you can say. So, a media darling. Nothing new. Nothing about the main covert operations. And the one that now comes into play is the Damascus Road conversion, where we've, of course, got Snowden, a warmonger in 2004, an enemy of leaks in 2009. And one of the listservs that I called attention to this, they said, oh, but you don't understand, that's part of his cover. Well, his cover, the real Snowden, will the real Snowden please stand up? How about if he had gone to Iraq in 2004 and started killing people? Would we just say, oh, that's just part of his cover, or or what? In other words, I'm afraid that what is operative here is a desire to be gulled, a desire to be duped, and this is bad news. So this, I submit, is in big trouble. This whole operation. Not only do we have Naomi Wolf and a measurable, at least, opposition among the left liberals, who I think have been burned once too many by these things. You've also got the skepticism addressed by Putin. Putin obviously doesn't trust Snowden. How could he? How can you trust anything that comes out of the American intelligence community? The American intelligence community knows very well that it will generate an opposition. They commit atrocities routinely. They know there will be an opposition. What is the obvious thing to do? Create the opposition yourself so that you can channel it in ways that do not threaten the essence of what you're doing, but only attack secondary, tertiary, quaternary, other, relatively unimportant aspects of it. So Maduro doesn't trust him, says he might be manipulated, and Putin doesn't trust him. And bravo, you shouldn't trust him with as far as you could throw this character. So he is now essentially hung out to dry, right? He's twisting in the wind in the transit lounge of Moscow airport, apparently according to some accounts of Anne Applebaum. It's a very dismal place, and the bars are not good and the lighting is bad and so forth. So the question now is, though, what happens? The thing that I would say to people is, if you've been agitating as I have recommended and appealed to you to do, if you have gotten on Twitter and Facebook and on various comment pages, right, postings, if you've been on there attacking the credibility of Snowden, pointing out that he's a triple agent, that the surface is he's from the CIA, the NSA, then the surface changes and he becomes a whistleblower, a traitor, some kind of a foreign agent, whatever. The ultimate reality is he's still operating according to a CIA script. If you've been doing that, take some credit. Feel that you have done something of historical importance. Again, because if the CIA can simply make people salivate, like Pavlovian dogs, every time they trot out one of these characters, and everybody goes head over heels for them, and everybody turns into groupies and cheerleaders and camp followers, then we're doomed. The prospects of civilization under that kind of a situation are bad. They're not encouraging. So if you've been undermining Snowden, you've got to share in the fact that this Psyop may be collapsing, and take some credit because you've done something important. But of course, the issue is to avoid the war in Syria, and we can explain that in just a minute on the Webster Tarpley program on Unbound Radio. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. And again, it's the 2nd of July, the second day at Gettysburg, 150th anniversary. The battle started yesterday, a little bit northwest of Gettysburg. Now the action on the second day has shifted to the famous Fishhook, Culp's Hill, Cemetery Ridge, down to Little Round Top, Big Round Top. And tomorrow, of course, we will have the Longstreet's assault, right? The Pettigrew assault, as they want to call it in North Carolina, but what you know as Pickett's Charge. And number of things to be said about this. One of the things that comes out of the commemoration is that Lee's army brought slavery. Make no mistake about it. It was the bringer of slavery. The Union Army, when it advanced, brought freedom for slaves, especially after the Emancipation Proclamation, but already before that, in terms of taking in fugitive slaves and in taking in slaves that were being used by enemies of the Union. That was already going on in the early to middle 1862. But after the Emancipation Proclamation of January 1st, 1863, the Union Army brought freedom for slaves. Where the Confederate Army went, and this was Lee going into southern Pennsylvania, Lee enslaved about 1,000 free black people, many of whom had never been slaves, who had lived free all their lives, and they were kidnapped and dragged down into the South because, despite what certain quacks and pseudo-historians of the libertarian brand in particular may want to say, the essence of the Confederate States of America was slavery. And that is what Alexander Stephens, the second in command, the vice president of the Confederacy, he says the basis of everything we do is our race theory, white supremacy, and the need for slavery as the natural order of things. You can also go and look at the various secession conventions of the various states and see what they talk about, right? When they say we're seceding, well, what's your beef, right? What's your complaint, right? Why are you leaving? Oh, because they're interfering with slavery and they're not returning our slaves. So the idea was not only did they want to have slaves for themselves, but they wanted to force other states to violate their own personal liberty laws, personal freedom laws, like Pennsylvania or Massachusetts, and return slaves once they had reached free territory. So when it came to states' rights for Pennsylvania or Massachusetts, no states' right. You got to send those slaves back, and you got to do it without a trial and essentially allowing these bounty hunters to go wild. So bad stuff. But it also shows the hypocrisy of the whole Confederate position, which was supposedly states' rights, but the only states' right that meant anything was their states' right to slavery. And that is what Seward talked about. You've seen him, David Strathairn, in the Lincoln movie. Seward's theory is the slave power conspiracy. In other words, if you're in the North at the beginning of the war, you're asked to fight not initially over slavery one way or the other, but to prevent a political faction based on slavery, the slave power conspiracy, from taking you over and essentially reducing your freedom by making you somehow a helper or a cog in this monstrous machine of slavery. So that's Seward. Very interesting. The Republican Party, 1860, their platform was a conspiracy. It was that there was a slave power conspiracy, and there was. So we'll get back to that too. I got less time in this segment than I had hoped. What we'll do in a minute is to comment on the significance of the merger of Snowden with Assange, because these have now joined together. It's like the Legion of Superheroes, right? It's, Batman and the Green Arrow or something have united. And what does this mean? Well, what it means is that all of the strictures and the analysis that I have advanced about Assange can now immediately be applied to his protege, his ally, his helper, his friendly rival, that is to say, Snowden. So we'll be looking at the Assange-Snowden or Snowden-Assange tandem and what this means. And it goes back to Cass Sunstein and the concept of cognitive infiltration, because that's what it's all based on. And we'll be back in a minute on the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. It again is the 2nd of July, right? Tomorrow is the end of the Battle of Gettysburg. And on 3rd to the 4th of July, we have the surrender of Vicksburg, when, as Lincoln said, the father of waters once more flows unvexed to the sea, unvexed by slavery, secessionism, and other factors. So bear that in mind, right? That's something to go and see, right? And both of these places are tremendous tourist destinations. And if you have kids, you want to show kids that history was real. Take them and show them these places. So we're just finishing up with Snowden, and then move on to this question of the Syrian situation, which is really what this is all about. Remember that Snowden came forward on the same day as the fall of Coup, right? The 5th of June. His main articles were the 5th and 6th of June, and now he's proceeding to go on, right, that the U.S. spies on China, the U.S. spies on participants in international summits in the U.K. Now, of course, that the U.S. spies on Brussels and the U.S. spies on Germany. So what is the point of this pattern? It is to weaken Obama, not with the sense that you're stopping Obama from doing something bad, but that you're trying to weaken Obama to make him do something worse than what he's doing at the moment, right? So the overall impact of Snowden, the hysteria, right? We saw it at the Left Forum in the first 10 days of June in New York City. A hysterical commitment once again to people who have no heroes. They've been looking to Noam Chomsky for 30 or 40 years as their hero. This gets you nowhere. They're hungry, thirsty. They have a hysterical desire to find a hero, so they think they found it with Glenn Greenwald and Snowden. And I'm sorry, this will not do. And as a matter of fact, this guarantees defeat. So Obama, according to one probably doctored but maybe accurate poll, lost 18% of his youth support, right? Hits him really where it hurts. Because you couldn't do this to a Republican, because Republicans care little about this stuff in general. And now the stuff with Germany, so you're screwing up Obama's foreign support, right? Germany in particular was a huge reservoir of hysterical acolytes for Obama. But the point of all this is, you're not doing it to neutralize Obama as a force of evil, but the goal of the operation is to undermine him and weaken him so that he will have no choice but to order the attack on Syria. The bombing of Syria. Yes, it goes together with the fact that Assange, remember WikiLeaks was announced in the pages of the Washington Post in the beginning of 2007, the article Brave New Wiki World by Cass Sunstein. Cass Sunstein also wrote then in a separate article in a journal, the need for the cognitive infiltration and disruption of social movements and bodies of opinion that do not accept the official U.S. government accounts of these events. And those government accounts, of course, are dictated by the financier faction in Wall Street, which is where the actual initiative for these things lies. So we can now say that Assange, the practitioner of cognitive disruption and cognitive infiltration, has now merged his forces with those of Snowden. The more recent example, perhaps there's envy at work, but these are now essentially the same thing. So it is also important to hang on to this fact, right? You cannot continue with politics as usual when there has been an attempted coup d'etat, and I'm sorry, there was an attempted coup d'etat. On the afternoon of June 12th, very documented article by Jeffrey Goldberg on Bloomberg News, there was an attempt by John Forbes Kerry of Skull and Bones to launch the bombing. And I've mentioned before, the tradition is Kissinger back in October 1973 put the U.S. on nuclear alert worldwide without asking Nixon. Nixon was asleep. And even more dramatic, Al Gore in March of 1999 launched the bombing, ordered the bombing of Serbia to begin to prevent a peaceful solution which was being brought by the Russian Prime Minister Primakov. So this is real. And there are a couple of articles. One article in particular argues that, oh no, this is not true. The overtone is that it's an invention of the Israelis, that this whole story never existed, that the Israelis are trying to make Obama look bad. No, I don't see it that way at all. Goldberg is writing because he wants this to happen, and he's trying to show people how it could have happened, but it was stopped, and who should be blamed. In other words, it's a hit piece. He's saying we have this wonderful John Forbes Kerry of Skull and Bones who wanted to start the bombing. That's the Skull and Bones tradition. But he was stopped by this awful General Dempsey of those, military hacks and bureaucrats at the Pentagon who also seem to be cozied up to Obama, right? They're willing to go with Obama against the hegemonic Petraeus clique. So, don't believe that crap. And I'm afraid one of these articles, the credentials, we have to get into this area of disinformation. There is no other way, and it implies a certain attention for the track record of people who are making these pronouncements. One prominent article which attempts to argue that there never was an attempt by Kerry to launch the bombing of Syria is written by someone who is reported on the internet very widely to be a Pentagon defense contractor himself. Secondly, to be a supporter, a personal friend. That's a personal friend of the former CIA director George Tenet. And thirdly, somebody who believes in the existence of flying saucers and extraterrestrial powers. He's even on record as saying that the United States has treaties with extraterrestrial powers. And whether this was Kissinger or not, I still can't figure out, doing the negotiating with the men from Mars. And that there's an entire underground civilization underneath the United States that we don't see and which is being kept from us. And I'm sorry, as soon as you come with the flying saucer stuff, or the lizard brains for that matter, you have discredited yourself to the point where your point of view really means nothing unless you can bring some pretty heavy-duty documents, which in this case you cannot do. So we've got all kinds of disinformation, right? We've got another website that operates at high temperature that says there's a backdoor deal between Putin and Obama to betray Syria. I see no signs of it. There's another website that did nothing to stop Obama from becoming president, but 2 months after he'd gotten there, decided he was the new Hitler and then painted a mustache on him. We got other websites that essentially say, yeah, it's true that Snowden makes the war with Syria more likely, but we should support him anyway because he's subjectively honest. I'm afraid that has everything to do with little Rand Paul having bought into Snowden for obvious opportunistic gate receipts reasons. So you really got to watch out. And my analysis is there for you to evaluate. Also, over time, because a lot of these things will come out. The question is, it's better to get it quicker than later. So, if Snowden is collapsing, if this Psyop, this limited hangout, is in the process of collapsing amidst general skepticism and indifference, this is a very good thing. Do everything you can to accelerate and guarantee the completion of this process. But here's the other thing, of course, that the longer the bombing of Syria can be delayed, then the better the chance that the Syrian government can restore order, can restore the legal government in the parts of the country that have been hijacked, taken over, conquered by these death squads, by these lunatics with their benighted Dark Ages concept of human nature and of administration and everything else. And the word we're getting from Syria is a continuous process of smaller localities that are being conquered by the Syrian army. I won't try to go into some of these places because the names themselves are not going to be meaningful to a broader international audience. But these are each one of these key villages, right? There was one this morning where the fighting had gone on for months, and the Syrian army has now taken over. So there's a feeling of resignation which is growing among the enemies of Syria. At the same time, we've got Kerry sabotaging the Geneva conference. He claims that he wants it, but his latest word was that there's no possibility of having a peace conference in Geneva before September, right? It was supposed to be June. June is gone. Then it was supposed to be July. Well, we're in July. No, says Kerry, we can't have it during the summer. Why not? I guess because they hope that they can somehow redress the military balance. And it is the task of civilized humanity to prevent that, because these people, the death squads, are terrorists. They are Al-Qaeda. They are Nusra. They are the Emirate of Iraq and the Levant. This is the people that have lived under this can't wait to get back under the Assad government, right? However problematic they might have found it before, it looks very good once they've had a good heavy dose of the death squads. So that is the situation, and that is why we oppose totalitarian measures. We're against wiretapping. We don't want the NSA and the CIA and so forth running wild. We don't believe in their theory of terrorism. We essentially reject the entire post-9/11 construct because we reject the 9/11 construct, right? There never was an attack coming from the outside, from anywhere outside. This was homegrown U.S. rogue network, Wall Street, and invisible government, parallel government, secret government, deep state, whatever you want to call it. The thing that brought you the Kennedy assassination, the Gulf of Tonkin, Iran-Contra, and so forth. It was always them. And right now, the thing to look at is Petraeus. Again, contrast the lionization in the media of characters like Ellsberg, Assange, and our dear friend Snowden. Compare that to Michael Hastings. Now, Michael Hastings, we're getting more and more reports that Michael Hastings was interviewing Jill Kelly, the woman of Arab origin who was a socialite in the social circle around the Tampa Central Command, right, among the officers and the officers' wives and the kind of genteel life that they try to carry on. Somewhat anachronistic, but this is what they do. So Jill Kelly was there, and she was being interviewed by Michael Hastings. He has told friends that he was being harassed by the FBI. The FBI was harassing his sources, and ultimately he hoped to prepare the greatest expose of the CIA that had ever been done. I would like to see people who are wasting their time on this character Snowden focus instead on something real, which is the tradition of the real whistleblowers, if you will. The Gary Webb of the San Jose Mercury News, dead, ruled a suicide. Very suspicious. This guy Hatfield, who wrote, I think it's called Fortunate Son, where he revealed that Bush, the younger George W. Bush, had been a drug user, had been arrested, and had been forced to do community service. And now we've got Hastings going after the Petraeus clique. The Petraeus clique is where the action is, and the CIA. This is where attention should be focused, not on the darlings of the glitterati international media. Back in a minute. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. Well, our hour goes very fast. Concerning the anniversary at Gettysburg, the main thing is, pay attention to it. You can watch it on C-SPAN, and you can certainly go to these places, right? The one at Gettysburg goes until, I think about the 10th of July. Take a look. There's a guidebook which you can also see online. I was there on Saturday, the 29th of June. McPherson gave a talk, and there were other interesting talks. I tried to ask a question, which I didn't succeed in doing. You may see me on the TV version on C-SPAN trying to get recognized, but failing because they only took one question. Unbelievable. The main problem is this: one of the great problems with this has been to some extent ameliorated. The leaving out of the U.S. colored troops and the role of black soldiers fighting for the Union, 200 to 250,000, and how decisive that was, because that was absolutely crucial both subtracting from the Confederacy and adding to the Union. But the other thing, of course, is the international framework. There are three crises of foreign intervention. There's the Trent Affair in 1861. There's the post-Antietam period, 1862, sort of September, October. And then there's the post-Gettysburg, right, about August, September, October 1863. The Trent Affair is solved by Lincoln's one war at a time doctrine. In 1862, it's Napoleon III who wants to organize European powers to mediate, in other words, to secure the independence of the slavocracy, the Confederacy. It is Russia that stops this. And then in the autumn of 1863, the British are preparing to deliver powerful ironclad battleships, the so-called Laird Rams warships, to the Confederacy. This is when Charles Francis Adams, the U.S. ambassador, says, he's talking to Lord Palmerston and Lord John Russell and Henry Gladstone. If you release these ships, then there's going to be war. The Union will be at war with you. And they back down. And the thing that makes this possible is the arrival of the Russian fleets. The Russian fleet from the European, the Baltic fleet comes to New York, and the Pacific fleet arrives in San Francisco. And the one in San Francisco prepares to defend San Francisco against the Confederate raider Shenandoah, because there are not enough Union warships in the port. This is what caused Gideon Welles, the Secretary of the Navy for the Union, to say, "Thank God for the Russians." That was his view. So that's what was going on. So this entire international dimension completely lost. So it needs to be restored. We'll do what we can. We still have a couple of months, but people in San Francisco and New York should begin maybe looking around to see what might turn out to be a possible way to secure such a commemoration. It would be a very good antidote to the bad blood generated by characters like Snowden these days. The other thing, maybe just briefly, we got almost no time left. Egypt, well, Morsi, right? What's wrong with Morsi? The Muslim Brotherhood is the rich guys. The Muslim Brotherhood is businessmen, doctors, lawyers, editors, professors. They're all wealthy. They do some social work, that's fine, but it's not the same thing. People want to have economic rights. The problem with the Muslim Brotherhood and Morsi, they capitulated to the International Monetary Fund. That was already last November. I told you in real time. They doubled the price of gasoline. They want to raise the price of food, cooking oil, household fuels, and all the rest of it. This is absolutely impossible. Anybody who does that in Egypt is asking for it, and now Morsi is getting it. The answer to the situation is Hamdin Sabahi, the guy who came in third in the presidential election. Remember, about a little bit more than a year ago, the presidential election in Egypt, the guy who came in first is Morsi. The second guy in the runoff was the army guy, a non-entity, and then the Nasserist Hamdin Sabahi, who got 21% of the vote. He got only 700,000 votes fewer than the army guy, who had that entire apparat working for him. So Hamdin Sabahi is the way to go. He's in the National Salvation Front. He is much better than these people like Amr Moussa or al-Baradei or any of them, right? Because those people have all been corrupted by Wall Street and the City of London. Hamdin Sabahi is the one I would like to direct your attention to him as a Nasserist capable of appealing to the better elements in the army. But his basic slogan is no to the Islamists and no to the IMF, no to the market fetishists. So that's the rundown on Egypt. And I'll be back next week here on the Webster Tarpley program. Keep in touch with me in the meantime at tarpley.net, Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed, Webster G. Tarpley. See you next week.